ERP software as we know it is dead. That's the breaking news we have for you this morning. But in all seriousness, maybe ERP software is not dead. But the thing we want to talk about here today is the fact that there are plenty of viable options in addition to ERP systems. ERP software is not the end all be all it once was. And so what we wanted to do today in today's live discussion is talk about what some of those alternatives are to the traditional monolithic ERP systems. What are those new emerging technologies that are becoming available? What are the options you have to get more immediate value out of AI and other types of emerging tech without necessarily having to rip out and replace your back office system? So that's the topic for today. Is ERP software dead? I'd love to hear in the chat just sort of your knee-jerk reaction from the audience here. Is ERP software dead, or do you think it's dying? Or do you think ERP software is alive and well? That's the debate and discussion we want to have here today. So please drop those in the chat. My name is 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗀𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients select and implement enterprise technologies, including ERP software, but also other types of technologies, and really any sort of AI, CRM, human capital management, supply chain, interoperability, middleware, anything related to enterprise technology, we help our clients through, and we're totally tech agnostic. Most of our clients are in manufacturing, distribution, and government, as well as other industries. So that's a little bit about us. And I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But before I do, quick couple logistical things. This is live discussion here. We're streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and X. So if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat. We're going to keep an eye on the chat here today, and love to hear your thoughts on is ERP software dead to get started. Also love to hear what city and country you're joining from today. My guest and I are both here in Denver, Colorado in the United States this week. So I'd love to hear where you're joining from. And let's jump into the discussion. To unpack this discussion, is ERP software dead, and what are the alternatives to ERP systems? Greg Benton is our Chief Strategy Officer here at Third Stage Consulting. Greg, thanks for joining again.
Good to see you this morning, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. And this is a really fun discussion because it's always fun to challenge the status quo and think outside the box and think about, what are we potentially missing? What are those blind spots or options we have in our digital strategies and ways we move forward? But before we dive into jumping into understanding whether or not ERP software is dead and having a healthy conversation, healthy debate about that, maybe with the audience as well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Third Stage.
Well, I'm, as the Chief Strategy Officer, leveraging about 25 years of implementing, developing strategies and blueprints around primarily ERP, but also all of the edge solutions that surround core ERP, right? So the e-commerce systems, CRM, warehouse management systems, workforce management systems, and all of that time, we've really run into a number of things that cause us to pause at certain points in the course of deploying software systems, and usually that's brought about by technology changes. And we've seen the technology changes coming with hyperscalers being involved with cloud deployments at the major ERP vendors level. And now more recently, we've seen AI come into the picture and really facilitate a lot more interaction, a lot more orchestration of different applications and systems. So there are becoming more and more alternatives to, massive universal ERP if you're trying to get to a universal and interoperating data set across your entire enterprise. So we'll be talking about that today. I think this is a great topic.
Yeah, it is. And apparently we've already struck a nerve or struck a chord with the audience here. Oops, I want to get to some of these audience questions here. So one question is from Jonathan, or one comment from Jonathan on YouTube. AI software is most likely going to evolve into ERP or at the least CRM systems, which will be focused on business data. Palantir is a great example of this. Andy on LinkedIn is already chiming in as well. It will always be alive because AI and or machine learning cannot learn without the data ERP provides. I suppose the big question there that we can get into here in a second is, do you need ERP or do you need a new ERP? I guess would be more the question. Do you need a new modern ERP system to provide the data that's needed for AI and machine learning? I think that's the $1 million question for a lot of organizations, especially those that are being sort of forced into the cloud migration path from, SAP, Microsoft, and some of the other big ERP vendors. And that's another thing we want to talk about is give the audience here options and alternatives. So you may have SAP or Microsoft, just as 2 examples, telling you need to get off the legacy system because we're going to cut off support. But the question becomes, do you really, though? Could you live with a legacy system that isn't maintained if you're just using it as more of a system of record? And then you layer on top, and at least in the interim, maybe some sort of technology that can take advantage of the data you have without the big, massive implementations there. So that's what we'll get into. Here's something we can get into in a moment. This is from 𝗵𝗂 on YouTube. Bit confused as to how ERP system fades away and what sort of business application will be replaced. And 𝗵𝗂 is watching from the Kingdom of Bahrain. So thank you for being here today. 𝗵𝗂 also wants to know, is Oracle Fusion no more valid? Dan says, I think evolving is a better characterization. We all need to process orders and manage manufacturing or a business.
Evolving is right. Yep.
How we process all those data is changing. So great point from Dan on LinkedIn, who is joining us from Chicago. Mech, we know him as well. He's from the Third Stage team, joining from Almost Heaven, West Virginia. So thanks for all the comments so far. Curious to hear from the rest of the audience. Is ERP software dead? Where do you think it's headed? But I guess just to start, just to get us started on this conversation, Greg, why is this even a discussion point? I'm not the first person. We're not the first people to come out and say ERP is dead or, death to ERP, that sort of thing. I mean, that's been going on for years now, but is this all hype? Is this clickbait, or is there real substance to this idea that ERP software as we know it may be dying?
I think it's a little bit of each of those. It's a little bit of hype. It's a little bit of posturing on the part of the systems integrators, frankly, in terms of, ERP is not dead. Look, it's a very symbiotic relationship between the interoperability platforms that are available now. I think Jonathan mentioned Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks, some of the others that come to mind, but they cannot replace those core enterprise operations. So finance, supply chain, on and on and on. So is ERP dead? Probably not. It becomes the kind of the living host for that symbiotic data layer that can be placed on top of or as a foundation to a new ERP system. So you think about ERP evolving, as someone said in the chat a little bit earlier, it's evolving into digital enterprise operations, which is really the whole gamut of the core ERP or back office functions, as well as everything that goes on top of that or connects to that. CRM being a big component there, HCM, warehouse management, PLM. I mean, just, an alphabet soup of a spaghetti mix of interactions and interoperability. The new systems that I mentioned actually create a great flexibility in the architecture that can join those disparate sources of information, including reaching out to the Internet of Things, right? IoT, and bringing all of that in so that you can make insightful decisions and really real-time decisions about what's going on with your business. That also allows you to build this foundation, this data foundation, that then you can build on top of that with the properly sequenced new application sets and new processes that you're going to bring to bear as your future operating state comes to fruition. And, that involves a lot of upfront planning, what we call phase 0 in preparation for the organization to move forward as a whole. And, all of those things are contributing to the death of ERP. It's really the evolution of the new digital enterprise operations.
Yeah. And I know back, when you and I were in the industry, maybe 20 years ago, it used to be sort of a faux pas, almost a bad word to talk about middleware integration, customization. Anytime you would talk about any of those things, it was sort of, for the last 10 to 20 years, it's been almost a faux pas to even think about that. But I think now things have changed. The technology has changed. And now it's more viable to, especially with some of these low code, no code options that you have out there. Like when you think of, like Rappit, for example, or
Yep.
even Odoo, even though Odoo's technically an ERP system, it's sort of that low code,
Right.
no code open source.
Right.
And then you've got like the Salesforce platform, which a lot of people think of Salesforce as just a CRM system, but it's a whole platform that third-party developers can create other apps on. So you've got all these different options that are sort of hybrids. They're not full on custom dev. They're not full on customizing out of the box software, but it's these more flexible options that can fill in some of the nooks and crannies, or in some cases even replace the need for a full-blown ERP replacement, especially if you just implemented a new ERP system, say 10 years ago. You may not be on the latest and greatest, most modern ERP system, but if it's good enough, if it's modern enough to where you can put cool new technologies on top of that, and get more immediate value without the cost and the risk, I think that's what we're talking about here, is what are those options? There's certainly trade-offs and risks and costs that you have that going down that path, but I think as part of your digital strategy and road mapping, just to be able to consider those options. How do you see customers reacting to this concept that you're talking about, these different alternatives?
Well, we're seeing more and more the idea that there are, for instance, in the composable ERP or best of breed assessment, many organizations, they're looking at how can I develop something that's going to focus and provide the use cases necessary to run my business in the way that a custom developed application that's running on an AS400 for the last 20 years does. And the way that you can do that is now with a more flexible architecture that's available, along with AI in these interoperability systems that you can be putting in place. And so that takes the place of, or at least enables that configuration that's going to match your business needs much more readily than anything that you can change in, the out-of-the-box software that comes with a multi-tenant environment and the current applications from all of the major ERP vendors. So I think it provides so much more flexibility, so much more focus on your business, that it's really managing through how are we going to get to a true transformation for our business, rather than really just a lift and shift of technology. So is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think companies are starting to think more about, do we need to replace our ERP system just because we need to get to the cloud, or because there's more modern technology out there, or is it because there's some sort of business value that we're going to get out of it? And it sounds basic enough. It sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of companies don't have that clarity of what it is they want to accomplish, and they feel like they have to move this direction that the ERP vendors want them to go. And what we're trying to show is, there's different pivots or different, off ramps that you could take, and on ramps you can take to manage that. Here's an interesting comment from Andy on LinkedIn. Andy says, the other interesting thought is, how will you pass your annual accounting audit? Hard to validate. Sounds like Andy's joining from Austin, Texas, I assume. So that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously you need to make sure your data, your controls are in place. And if you need a new ERP system because you don't have that, then sure, you may need to replace your back office ERP system. But again, assuming you implemented something, say 10 or 15 years ago, and you've got the controls in place, the data is fine, then the question becomes, where's the real value going to be? Is it going to be in upgrading to the latest and greatest ERP, or could it be that there's other options out there, or is it a combination of all the above? Tom,
and if you are going to make that evaluation, shouldn't you be looking at what are the alternatives? So instead of just going to the ERP vendor that you've been working with all the way along and looking at moving to their latest and greatest, should you be looking at other alternatives? Very often it's going to point to staying with, especially your partnered provider that's been around for a long time, that is going to limit change, is going to limit some of the risk involved in moving to a new system. But you should take a look at the new tools that are out there and available for you, especially getting to some rapid time to value. Stakeholders within organizations are looking for more unified data, more insightful and real-time data that they can pull from disparate systems within their organization that have kind of evolved over time, right? And the new tools that are available to you facilitate that. And you can be in a kind of uniform data model within 60 to 90 days rather than a year or two for a full ERP replacement.
Right. Yeah, that kind of leads to you're starting to answer another question I had for you, which is,
Sorry.
no, that's right. It's a perfect segue. From your perspective, what are the biggest forces that are or could be driving companies away from traditional monolithic ERP systems? You just talked about, speed to value being one, but are there other trends that you're seeing that are causing clients, and we've got a couple that you and I have talked about where they've sort of put off their ERP initiative
Yeah.
and accelerated, move forward other enterprise technology initiatives. But what's driving this? What are some of the other things that are driving that trend?
Well, organizational risk and also the capital T in transformation really assumes that you're going to change some of those, in many cases, 20, 30-year-old processes that are outdated, that are manual, that are highly risky for the organization. And this will allow you to really just back up a little bit. We get called in many times to restart or re-engineer a quote failed ERP implementation. And in so doing, you have to back up and perform really a phase zero, getting the organization ready for that move, and then reducing risk in the move also, making it so that everyone's on board with the changes that are coming, that are going to be a benefit to them, that are going to be a benefit to the organization from a financial standpoint, and modify some of those old processes so that you're now optimized in the way that your software systems actually control the processes. They actually put a security barrier around the way that those processes work in your organization. And that really is what's driving this look at how can we get started with the interoperability hub, or kind of the mission control as the foundation, and then build on top of that with a composable ERP. So the enterprise systems surround that core. And that's really what people are looking for right now. Reducing risk, reducing cost, and producing some immediate time to value in the reporting and the BI that's available to you within months instead of at the end of the entire process, right?
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, makes total sense, and I agree with you. Those are some important drivers that are causing some people to rethink their strategies. Not everyone is going to fit into any one path, but it's again important to know what your options are. Here's a
sure.
comment from Tom on LinkedIn. Says resource planning will never become obsolete. The combination of platforms, technology, software, and business processes involved will continue to undergo constant change and improvement. And then
Absolutely agree with that, by the way. I mean, think about the move for ERP vendors to hyperscaling technologies on the computing side, being able to scale to any level, being able to orchestrate different applications and load balancing along the way, right? So that was one area where it took it out of the internal data center, so to speak, and moved it into these multi-tenant cloud platforms. The advent of AI, and I remember that in 2017, Infor, among others, introduced, in their case, Coleman, which was an AI system that allowed for a lot of queries to go on within Infor applications. What's happening now is all of the ERP systems are moving to an AI that's really interchangeable with other systems. So it's moving toward this interoperability platform as well. And they're developing those very rapidly and making it a part of that multi-tenant rollout of their newest technologies. So it is evolving even within those enterprise systems.
right.
Is the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And there's a comment from X. Someone says, I enjoy ERP Next open source. Another open source alternative to traditional monolithic ERP systems, much like Odoo, but ERP Next is an alternative to Odoo if you're looking for open source types of systems. Tom on LinkedIn really likes your term digital enterprise operations. He says it's an excellent candidate term to replace the increasingly ambiguous term ERP. I think the word
I
ERP,
love that, Tom. You know,
great minds think alike.
EO. If ERP, if anything about ERP is dead, enterprise resource planning as a term that covers, you know, everything, the ubiquitous enterprise systems is dead. Digital enterprise operations is really what we're talking about. And that encompasses kind of the strategy and business case for moving to something new, right? So you're following a blueprint, hopefully, as an organization that takes you through the next 3, 7, and even 10 years in that entire transformation journey. So DEO is a much more apt term for what we're talking about now. Love
yeah,
that.
and I don't know about you, but I'd be okay if we retired the terms ERP and digital transformation for that matter. We use it. We're just
or the digital part of digital transformation, right?
Yeah, just call it transformation or business transformation, or I don't know. There's got to be something better, but DEO might be it. Maybe that's the replacement. I know we've sort of used that increasingly over the years, and we'll see if it catches on here as a new. That's just what we need. Those another buzzword. Then people say, well, DEO is getting overused and it's too ambiguous. We need another term. So, but I think it's a good potential replacement there.
Well, hey, you know, I'm just getting used to using the term cloud. So
right,
yeah.
Right. And soon that'll be obsolete too, because everything will be in the cloud. So you won't have to specify that it's cloud because it's just
won't think of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Raj on YouTube says AI will more likely evolve as a management tool within ERP initially at level 0. Enterprise resource is a must pillar of any ERP system. Hard to conceive the death of ERP. So I think you're right. I tend to agree with that. I don't think SAP will be dead in 5 years or anything like that. But I do think, I mean, my personal opinion is that maybe not so much Oracle or Microsoft, just because they're such diversified companies outside of traditional ERP. But I think SAP in particular is at risk of becoming the next Bond. You know, the software that comes and goes, and there's a new incumbent that takes over. You know, sort of that top spot. I don't think SAP will be there in the long term. It's just my personal opinion that a lot of that's just based on the product, the strategy, the way they pursue their go-to-market, the way the goodwill they're losing in the market right now. I think they remind me of BlackBerry right before Apple came out with the iPhone.
Wow.
It's sort of like the hubris and the arrogance behind, you know, ERP will never die. Our product is amazing. Monolithic ERP, you know, long live monolithic ERP, without recognizing some of these other trends. I think that will lead to the downfall of SAP. But I'd love to hear if anyone agrees or disagrees with me. I'm sure many of you both agree and disagree with me. So I'd love to hear your comments. Will SAP be dead in the future? That's another question for you there. Here's an interesting question, and it's bringing up a really good point that is relevant to this alternative to ERP that we're talking about. This again is from Tom on LinkedIn. Tom says, will dominant ERP players see business opportunity in playing well with others, reversing the trend and temptation to promote vendor lock-in? So let's talk about vendor lock-in. That's a hot topic.
Gosh, Tom is just really hitting it, right? So
Tom's on fire. We need Tom on every live stream. Every time we do these live, we need Tom on there just because he's rolling now.
So working with the major ERP vendors, and over the last, call it 5 to 10 years, we've seen a shift that they used to be selling into the marketplace with a go-to-market strategy of implementing a monolithic ERP system and a single ERP system, and adding more of the bolt-ons or edge solutions to that so that people didn't have to go somewhere else. That's really changed over the last couple of years with a number of these ERP vendors that I won't name, because then I'll skip somebody and somebody will get mad at me. But they are playing nicely in the sandbox now. So if you have somebody that's running core financials and supply chain, and they're together in a best of breed solution with, all right, I'll mention one, a Workday HCM solution. Those two used to be kind of combative in terms of wanting to be the single ERP system. Anymore, I think that they actually work together very well. The integration and APIs between the two can be developed with Snowflake, Databricks, or even other systems that come with AWS and Azure. So that best of breed or composable ERP or digital enterprise operations is facilitated by the new tools that are available. And, that is the trend. That is the trend we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like the strategy that some vendors are doing to sort of leverage both, almost like they're sort of in the
Yeah.
middle. They are providing this traditional semi-monolithic ERP option, but they're also layering on top of that other option. So I think of like Salesforce, I think has been really good at this over the years, and even
Oh, they
now,
have.
I mean, Microsoft's been good at it with D365. I think NetSuite is starting to catch on to this too. So those are three examples right there: NetSuite, Microsoft, and Salesforce. They
Yep.
are all, you could call them semi-traditional ERP or enterprise tech off-the-shelf systems, but they have also built these platforms and the opportunity for third-party developers to create
Yeah.
apps on top of their platform. So now you get a core ERP system, but you're not beholden just to that one system. You're not locked in necessarily just to the limitations of that one system. Now you can go to third parties and look at other bolt-ons. And Microsoft's done this forever. They've got the whole ISV model.
Microsoft is, the pioneer.
Yeah. And whereas SAP, and to a lesser degree, Oracle have been sort of the other extreme, where it's been more of a closed environment, more of a greenfield, building everything from the ground up, which was a strength for SAP in particular for a long time. But I think it's becoming a liability now in terms of flexibility and adaptation. Now customers are getting too locked into SAP, I think, and we'll see how that unfolds in the coming years. It's a great point from Tom. Another question from X. Question, it's more of a comment, but I'm curious to hear what you think, Greg. But the comment here is, in my opinion, ERP vendors need to be mindful of pricing themselves out of the market of the future. And it sort of ties into that vendor lock-in thing too. Once you get locked in by the vendor, they can pretty much do whatever they want in these cloud subscription environments as far as price escalations, cost increases, things like that. And I think they'll keep doing it. They'll keep pricing it up until enough customers push back and cry uncle, or whatever the saying is. So what are your thoughts on this? Are ERPs
or if enough alternatives are provided? So if we have more of the interoperability platforms that come to the fore, many of the processes that are managed or automated by a single ERP system, or really that monolithic idea, can now be controlled and managed in a bidirectional manner by the interoperability platforms. And so I think they're not going to get maybe priced out of the market, but part of it's going to be deployed out of the market. When you've got a 30, 60, 90-day deployment window for a Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks, and I just say those right off the top of my head. That doesn't compare with spending 6 months to a year to 18 months to deploy and put in a new software system. So the cost of the implementation, the time of the implementation, and the time to value is what is going to push them out of the market, or at least push alternatives to the fore, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You look at, we were talking about Odoo and ERP Next. I mean, that's how they burst into the scene, as they took advantage of the fact that the pricing was so expensive and on some of these ERP systems, and they offered a lower cost option. In the case of, I know for a fact Odoo, and I think ERP Next as well, just as two examples, they offer this sort of freemium option where you can actually get your hands on the software. You can try it for free. And then as you add modules or users, then you start paying. But they've sort of disrupted the market in that way. And I think there's other disruptors that are other disruptions happening now and others that we don't even know about yet that are forthcoming. One thing I want to share with the audience too, just while we're talking about this, is we're talking a lot about trends and where the enterprise tech space is headed and how you should be thinking about your digital strategies. I'm going to include a link or a QR code right here, top left corner of your screen. We'll include the link below in the comments or in the description. But if you want to download our digital transformation report, it's an annual report we publish each year, and it contains a number of industry trends, best practices, just what we're seeing in the industry. And it also contains a number of independent tech agnostic reviews of different software options that are out there. So I highly encourage you to check that out. It's free. You can get it on our website. Just scan the QR code here on the screen and you can get that.
Hey, Eric, while people are there too, please check out the Stratosphere conference that we have coming up in August, the 25th through the 27th in Denver. And that really is an opportunity to get one-on-one discussions going, to meet many of the ERP vendors that will also be there. The only rule is they can't really sell their systems. They have to be talking about what's coming in terms of their technology and roadmaps, right? So getting right to the heart of this whole question about ERP and the evolution into DEO. And there's going to be a lot of that discussion with thought leaders, people like 𝗂𝗵𝗃𝘀𝗀, who are going to be there talking about, I always call Jan the kind of the godfather of ERP, but that tells you the caliber of the people that we will have speaking and interacting at this conference in Denver. So,
yeah, I'll while we're talking here, I'll flash a QR code for that as well in just a moment. Partially because I have to create it here while we're talking, which I'm terrible at multitasking. So let me come back to that. I'll wait till you're talking again, and then I'll create it. But just coming back to the some of the comments here on social media. Dan on LinkedIn says, I like Tom's new name for ERP, but I would add the word platform for the description because we're talking about an all-encompassing tool. Great point. Totally agree with that.
We have an option that we've been exploring for about the last 4 or 5 years here at Third Stage, called Platform Select. And it's no longer about just selecting an ERP system. It's about selecting that entire digital enterprise operations picture, right? And moving into a phase 0 that prepares an organization. And we actually call that Platform Select. So I love your idea of thinking about platforms rather than maybe just application sets or systems as well. Yep.
Yeah. Andy, I think this is in reference to when we were talking about the renaming of ERP and digital transformation. Andy on LinkedIn says, exactly. We have been digital for quite some time. And then Middo on YouTube says, functions in an ERP, managing foundational data, integrating disparate business functions, and enforcing structured processes remain essential, and AI can be made to act as a powerful layer on top. I often wonder if, do you think ERP systems in general will evolve into more of a true system of record / database, glorified database, and then AI ends up becoming what ERP used to be in terms of reporting and BI and that sort of thing? Because now if you think about it, you don't necessarily need to, even some of the systems we're using internally at Third Stage, and we see it with our clients too, but even systems we're using now, you've got the conversational AI interface where now I don't have to go into our CRM to run a report to see how many deals you're working on or whatever. I can just ask it, tell me the last 10 deals we closed, or show me the last 10 opportunities that popped into the pipeline or whatever. So is that something you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. I mean, think about this. If you were to look back a year ago and people were talking about ChatGPT, would you have seen that as a tool that would be indispensable to you today? Like I think it is for many people, right? We use it just kind of out of convenience, basically out of a need to really assess things very quickly and put that into writing, especially in emails, things like that. I think the same thing is happening with ERP systems. They've all got a user interface now that is more conversational. That's more like Alexa or Siri, that type of interface. And I think that'll continue to grow and expand, making it easier to essentially analyze your business, get reporting out, do all of the functions that used to be proprietary to that single ERP system. And now you're going to be able to do it through multiple ERP systems, multiple edge solutions within your enterprise. Yeah, I think that's definitely the way it's going.
Yeah.
And it's growing rapidly. I mean, I said, think about a year ago with ChatGPT. Think about a year from now with enterprise systems. They're evolving that quickly. So,
yeah, it's a good way to put it, because I know 2 years ago when I first started using ChatGPT, I thought it was cool, but I didn't fully recognize or realize how ingrained it would be in my day-to-day life. Now I use it, I'd say hourly. I mean, I'd be surprised if there's an hour that goes by in my day that I'm not using ChatGPT or AI in some way, just to, leverage time and effort and things like that. We were talking about the 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗀𝘂𝘁 conference. I'm going to see if I can pop it up here. There is a, oops, that is not the one I want to show you. So you should see it now. Yep, it's cut. The text is cut off, but if you scan the QR code, it still works. It says 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗀𝘂𝘁 sort of, but the QR code you see right here on the top left, you can scan that to learn more about our 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝗀𝘂𝘁 conference that's coming up in Denver. You can also join it virtually too. So wherever in the world you're joining from, you can join virtually or you can be there in person. So we've got 3 different passes available: the virtual, the regular in-person pass, and then a VIP in-person pass. So be sure to check that out. You can see the agenda, speaker lineup, all that stuff. It's tech agnostic. We talk about all kinds of trends, and it's meant to be something that's not vendor marketing hype and spin. It's meant to be just a no BS agnostic view of the market and things you need to know to be successful. So be sure to check that out. I'll leave that QR code up here for a second so you can scan that. Middo continues on that. So we may say it will be a smart ERP system. It can never be replaced completely. It's a good way to look at it. 𝗔𝗯nci𝘂𝘁𝘂𝘁, it's Stan. Maybe Stan's I'll say Stan because that's easier for me to pronounce. On YouTube says, I just started my ERP startup in Kenya to serve the local people, currently getting a lot of positive energy. So I think that's an interesting comment, because the fact that there's positive energy and interest in something different, I think is probably representative of what's going on in the market.
First step in change management and adoption is getting everyone's interest in moving forward to something new, better. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Do you want to, or go ahead. Well,
I was going to say, this is really interesting. I've not heard this comment before, but Andy on LinkedIn is making the early call here. IBM will pick up SAP. So now that he said that, it's going to be all over the internet. It's going to be all over the internet now that IBM bought SAP. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember this last April Fool's? I don't know if you saw it, but on April Fool's Day, and I totally fell for this. I woke up and I got on LinkedIn just on my phone, and there is a post that had like thousands of likes and it was going viral, and it was saying that Donald Trump had bought SAP. And for a second, I was like, that almost sounds like something he would do. But then it turns out to be an April Fool's joke. So now that Andy is saying that he thinks IBM is going to buy SAP, that'll become the fake news of the day on the internet. But that is an interesting,
fake news.
Really interesting comment. You can see that happening actually, because IBM and SAP already are sort of intertwined, and that would actually make a lot of sense.
Very much so. Yeah.
And they both represent the old monolithic guard. So what better way just to put them together? So here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. How do you help stakeholders get on board with changing processes that they may have used for decades? So you talk about all these platforms, ERP systems, open source, all these interoperability, all these new technologies, AI. How do you get people on board with changing those processes when they're just so used to the way things were?
We've got several clients now that are going through this entire process, and the way that we are managing through it is having them look introspectively at the way that they do things today, and realizing that there's a whole lot of manual processes involved. There's a whole lot of inefficiency in the way that they do business, that workflow is conducted across the enterprise. And looking at a future state that is going to manage some of that or reduce some of the waste that goes on with some of those old processes that are still done just because there's tribal knowledge in the organization, just because, you know, that's the way it's been done for the last 20 years. And that's the way I was trained to do it, and get them excited about moving into something new, something that's going to be more in keeping with the way that, you know, the latest generation of iPhone users, for instance, use applications and data and technology. It's very much in a interactive model, and getting people excited about having something new that they can use in that same way is the way that we get people on board. And then more importantly, really just lead to adoption and continual use and optimization of those systems once in place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and change management is obviously a really important part of all this, and something that needs to be managed no matter what you do, whether you're, you know, putting in a new ERP system or one of these other options we're talking about. It's going to be a cultural shift. It's going to be a challenge for you to go through it. And related to that, here's a follow-up question that's very related to that. This is from 𝗟𝗶𝘃𝘁 on YouTube. 𝗟𝗶𝘃 says, is the death of ERP more about technology limitations, or is it a cultural shift in how organizations view transformation and agility? It's a great question. What do you think?
That's a great question. You know, I think it also goes back to the deployment, to the implementation of systems, and the way that change is managed through the entire process. You've got to have a lot of transparency. You've got to have you know, people at all levels of the organization, and basically your best people that have the subject matter expertise to bring to the project, fully involved with the project, and not getting exhausted in the way that things are being delivered over a period of many years. You have to keep it fresh. You have to make sure that the implementation is well planned, that your end goal is solidly in mind when you're starting the project. And that way you can keep everybody moving in the same direction. You've also got to celebrate quick wins along the way. And I think that in the past, we haven't done that. We've just turned it over to a systems integrator, and they've been off and running with sometimes dozens of consultants doing things in the background. Don't look behind the curtain. And when we're done, we'll hand you the system, and then you'll start using it. You've been doing web-based training and you're off and running. Well, that just rarely works. And that leads to that 70 to 80% of implementations that fail. Much of it is the change management, training, and adoption eventually of the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. And don't look behind the curtain. You know, that's another important phenomena that leads to cost and time overruns with the traditional ERP model, and vendor lock-in, all that stuff. Those are all symptoms of some of those other issues we were talking about. Just a general comment, vendor-specific comment from Middo on YouTube. I may say Oracle Fusion is getting into as smart ERP as I see their progress. Fair comment. Another comment from X about ERP Next. ERP Next has a GitHub repository that allows you to local host, and it's a full version. So interesting comment there. Thanks for your feedback there. Here's a first-time comment today from Rajiv on YouTube. Rajiv says, great conversation. I believe ERP will continue, but various workflow and table structures will undergo change. Some parts will be taken up by AI agents, and the balance will continue with humans.
I love it. Rajiv is obviously a very technical person because he's talking about AI taking over tables.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We need that. We need that technical perspective here.
We need that. We need that.
Because you and I are not the most technical people, so it's good to have people in the audience here that are. Interesting comment here. Follow-up from Rajiv. Microsoft D365 is a platform with a foundation of collaboration. This should get better market share now. Actually, I agree. I think Microsoft has we don't play favorites here at third stage, but I think their strategy is more suited for where the industry is going, among others. They're not the only one. I think Oracle in some ways is doing the same. NetSuite, I think, is pivoting really well in sort of their position in the market.
Epicor as well.
Infor
as well.
Yeah, a lot of these.
especially on, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you've got to watch these tier two, these larger tier two players like Epicor, Infor, NetSuite. I think they're not only moving up market, but they're
IFS.
yeah, IFS. They're just a bit more nimble, in terms of how they respond in the offering, the overall solution offering they're providing to their clients. What were you gonna say though? I interrupted you and you were gonna say something.
I was just going to say that many of the ERP vendors, whether you call it tier two or even quasi tier one, are definitely tailoring to industry solutions as well as incorporating AI, machine learning, and some of the other elements that we've been discussing today in their roadmaps going forward. I think that's going to keep them entirely relevant in terms of the discussion of DEO in the future. Whatever we decide to call it, it is all about transformation. It is all about the people and process part of making your organization work in a better way, right? Get to an optimized state and then stay there, kind of that third stage of digital transformation. And there I used the term digital again, didn't I? So
I know it's hard. Old habits die hard, I suppose.
right, that's right.
Here's a question from Simon on YouTube. Simon says, how do you see microservices / APIs first impacting ERP adoption? Does this look like another accelerator to make ERP systems less monolithic?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, the interoperability layer that we've been talking about with Palantir and Snowflake and Databricks, that API base is basically what connects disparate systems and even the internet to the core ERP to a single source of the truth. And that is a direction that is just kind of in keeping with your question about, is this changing things? Yes, it's rapidly changing things. So
Yeah, microservices. I know you mentioned 𝗂𝗵𝗀 earlier, and that's something he's really big on, is this whole microservices concept too.
right.
Let's see. Just looking through all the questions and comments. Thank you for all the great questions here. Here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn that I think is a really good one to get into. How does platform differ from a traditional ERP selection? So if you're going through this process, let's just say, we've got clients that are going through this right now where they're trying to figure out what system and or platforms they might want to consider. How do you navigate the two camps in the evaluation process?
Well, the enterprise platforms that we've been talking about, I mean, Salesforce is a great example of an enterprise platform, right? But it's not generally an ERP system. ServiceNow is a platform. The hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, are also platforms that can connect and manage different application sets and different systems on one major platform. So think about looking at digital enterprise operations again. So core ERP plus all of the edge solutions that surround it, getting those individual platforms and cloud-based solutions, on-premise solutions into a single unified structure is really what we're talking about in terms of the overall platform for an organization.
Right. And then Macklin from the Third Stage team here on LinkedIn has a similar comment. It's a longer one, so it doesn't all show here, but I'll hit the high points here. I think interoperability platforms will give way to the rise of smaller software vendors because the old guard vendors are too bloated in functionality. I believe the newer software vendors will specialize on specific areas, and then the interoperability platform will allow the user to interact with all the various systems under the same umbrella. So that's where like a Palantir or a Snowflake, for example, comes into play. That essentially becomes your front end ERP user interface, and then you've got other systems behind it that it's drawing from, and then it
Right.
layers on AI, reporting, all that stuff. So it feels like you're using one system, but there's multiple systems behind it that are feeding into it. And some might say that's just putting lipstick on a pig, to use a old school phrase or
That's
cliche.
very old school.
But a lot of people say, well, that's just putting lipstick on a pig. You're not solving the real core problem if you've got old systems that are feeding a more modern, like a Palantir or a Snowflake or whatever. What do you say to that? I mean, is that a good interim solution? Could it be a good long-term solution, or is it just something that's more of a Band-Aid to get you through until you're ready to replace those back-end systems?
No, I know that Mechlin is working with a client that is very forward-looking and moving into this whole interoperability layer in a big way. And one of the questions that came up, especially with the executive team, is, are we creating something that is going to be throwaway in building this out? And the answer is absolutely not. The answer is, you're going to be creating a normalized data platform that is then going to be really kind of the basis or the substrate of everything that you're going to be building on top of it. It's going to allow you to do things quickly, get to a return on the value and the investment that you're making in the system. But it's going to persist as you move into replacement of some of the very old systems and processes that are running in the organization today. So no, I don't think that it's something that you put in place as a temporary solution. It's a permanent foundation, if you want to look at it that way.
What about someone who puts in that permanent foundation? Let's just say it's Palantir. I put in Palantir, and let's just say in this hypothetical scenario, I'm using SAP ECC. I'm using not an old version, but I'm using, like, I don't know, Salesforce is my CRM system, and I've got a few different systems. Some of them outdated, some of them more modern than others, whatever. But let's hone in on the SAP side. Like I've got ECC. I decide I'm not going to follow SAP's 2030 deadline. I'm going to leave ECC in place intact in the short term. I'm going to put in Palantir on top, and that's going to become the layer that my employees all interface with. I go live, great. Now I'm using the power of Palantir. Could I at some point in the future say, okay, now it is time for me to rip out ECC because whatever, it's too much customization, there's technical debt. I need to at some point upgrade it. And now I'm going to rip out ECC and put in S/4HANA behind it. Is that a viable strategy? Is that something that companies could be thinking about as a strategy, particularly SAP customers or any other legacy ERP system that they're thinking about upgrading to?
Absolutely. It's a bridge to that change, right? In other words, if you're not going to make the decision today to move from ECC to S4 in this scenario, this gets you the time that is needed to understand exactly what would be the best solution. Maybe it is moving to S4, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's replacing with something else, or maybe it's staying on ECC and working with Rimini Street or some other alternative to continue to keep that moving while you don't make the entire transition to S4. I guess transition is not a good word for that, for the re-implementation or the implementation of S4. And that's a big question in the SAP marketplace, right? Not so much in some of the other ERP vendors where you're moving from the current version to the latest version. They are a lot simpler, smoother path. And not to pick on SAP, but we've seen a lot of headlines lately.
Yeah, so they make it easy to pick on them.
But think of it as a bridge to get to that long-term end state and operating state that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. And this is what SAP doesn't want you to know. There's two things you just shared that SAP does not want you to know. One is they say they're cutting off support in 2030 for ECC. You mentioned Rimini Street. There's others like Spinnaker, third-party SAP support providers that will provide support for ECC at least until 2040. And I imagine they'll probably go even longer. But for right now, they've said they'll support ECC through 2040. So right there's a lifeline that buys you 10 more years. And especially if you've just implemented, we have one client based in Nebraska that we're just starting to work with. and they had just finished implementing ECC, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and it was part of a multi-year big global transformation. So it took them a long time to go through it. They finished the implementation like 2 years ago, and they were saying like a year or two before they even finished the implementation, SAP was already breathing down their neck saying, hey, it's time to upgrade to S/4HANA. And their view was, wait, our business case is a 7-year business case. We need 7 years of business value to justify this big, massive ECC investment we just made. So no, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to upgrade to S/4HANA.
We're still depreciating it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, let us get the value. Let us get our footing on what we just did. We're not going to go through this again. So I think looking at what your lifelines are, and if your lifeline is going to be third-party maintenance, great. If your lifeline might be the second thing that SAP doesn't want you to know, which is put in a Palantir or a Snowflake or some other AI tool that ends up becoming that layer that gives you some immediate value with a lot less time, cost, and risk and heartache to go along with that. So I think that's the way to think about it, is what can we do to mitigate the risk that the vendors are imposing on us, and how can we continue to run our business the way we want to run our business and do it in a way that aligns with our needs, not necessarily that of our software vendor. I think that's the way you've got to think through it, and not worry too much about vendor A, B, or C telling you you've got to get off that system because it's old. I mean, honestly, who cares? We still have some clients that are coming to us saying, hey, we're still running an iSeries or an AS400 based homegrown system. I would not advise you. I wouldn't advise you do that, but I'm just saying there's so many companies that they've let it ride. They sweat the assets for 40 years that for some companies, it just makes sense, right? I mean, it's not a terrible thing to use old technology.
Yeah.
The technologists in us all want to say, don't do it. It's old, outdated technology. Move to the cloud, get analytics and BI and all the cool stuff. The technologists in us might think that, but you have to look at it more from the business perspective and say, does it give us value? It sounds cool, but is it going to give us value?
Think about this too in different industries, like PE firms, where you have a portfolio of different businesses that are running different software systems. Like one may be running ECC, another one may be running Oracle or something else. As you're bringing those together under a single corporate umbrella, and you're trying to get insights and information out of all of those businesses and run them as a single entity, this interoperability layer allows you to continue to keep those somewhat independent businesses running on that software system that works for them, right? Over a longer period of time. So reducing change, reducing risk. This is a new way of bridging to that true transformation for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's an interesting question from X again. The question is, with AI changing the face of technology, should we expect to see more startups, and how can ERP help? So do you think there's more tech startups that are forthcoming given the trends and the changes and the seismic shifts in the market that we're seeing right now?
Oh, I think you will agree, Eric. The advent of AI, machine learning, is really just creating a whole new industry surrounding AI. Some of the proprietary tools that we use are different constructs, different, and allowing for a different methodology than we'd even thought of 2 years ago. So even third stage is evolving as we create our own intellectual property surrounding these tools. That's going to cause proliferation of new businesses coming in with new capabilities to address problems and gaps that we've seen in the past with enterprise systems and deployments. Deployments in months instead of years has been the target of moving to the cloud and moving to multi-tenant structures for years and years. But now you add robotic automation for testing, for instance, in implementations and things like that. It's going to speed implementations. It's going to cause a whole new marketplace of ecosystem partners that are available to people that use these tools.
Yeah. I'd say now is a really good time to start. And if you're going to do a startup, whether it's ERP or something related to enterprise tech, now is a really good time, because you can leverage AI, first of all, to build the software. So, the barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been. And second of all, one thing we see in the space is this lack of trust and this distrust of the enterprise technology incumbents. These big ERP software vendors haven't done themselves any favors by the way they've gone about the migration to the cloud, in the forced migrations and the sunsetting, the arbitrary sunset dates, and will they or won't they cut off support for their product that we're already paying for? It's their prerogative to do it, the software vendors, but it's creating a huge amount of distrust in the market right now. And I think companies are clamoring for alternatives. And so that's part of why our company has done so well at Third Stage, is because we're agnostic. We're not drinking the Kool-Aid. We're not shoving technology down anyone's throat. And we're just there to be our trusted advisor to our clients. And it's a trust thing. I always tell our team when we're, onboarding people or having our leadership meetings, it's about, we're selling trust is what we're selling. We're not selling technology or even technology services. It's trust. And so I think if you can create an ERP system that addresses that and provides an alternative and a lower cost, higher value sort of solution, you look at, for example, Odoo recently, I think in the last year or so, just got a big $500 million investment from Google's parent company. And among others, I think there were several investors. But point being, they're not that old of a company. They're newer company. They're different, and they're getting these huge valuations. Now, to be fair, SAP's stock price is doing really well. I mean, their stock price is doing great for investors, largely because they're starting to see fruits of their labor of shifting so many customers to the cloud. And investors know there's still a lot more that still need to shift to the cloud, and the more that are going to shift to the cloud, the better the stock price is going to do, and the better the executives are going to get comped on that. So anyway, so I don't know what your thoughts are there, but I feel like now is a good time to, if you're going to start an ERP software company or provider, I think now would be a great time.
I think for all the reasons you mentioned, and the fact that everyone is going to have to be determining where they are going to go and how they are going to get there over the next 2 to 3 years. You mentioned SAP. All of the ERP vendors are moving everyone to their cloud-based solution if they weren't native cloud already. That is causing, just a dam burst in terms of organizations that are looking to make that move and to deploy resources to make it happen. And so it's becoming a very crowded marketplace. Anyone that can bring tools to bear that are going to simplify that are going to streamline it, are going to do very well. So yeah, now is the time to act.
Yeah. I've got to stop for a second here. This is the first, so I've been doing these podcasts now for like 4.5 years. This is the first conversation where I completely lost track of time. I had no idea that it's already been an hour. So quick time check. Are you okay? Do you have a hard stop or do you have a meeting you're late for right now?
I don't. No.
Can we go a couple more minutes here? Because there's a couple really good questions I want to get to. And
this is not going to make a very brief podcast though. So.
I know. I swore we were about 30 minutes in. I wasn't even.
I've never seen this many questions coming across on the chat.
I know, and some really good ones just came in that we just
can't. Not even questions. People interacting with the conversation.
Yeah, and I had about a dozen questions for you. I think I've gotten through 2 of them, but because these are such great questions. So here's a kind of a funny comment from William on YouTube. William, this is back to the comment when we were talking about Donald Trump buying SAP is the April Fool's joke. William clarifies and says it was actually Stormy Daniels who bought SAP. Career pivot. A little inside humor for those that follow American politics and controversies. Here's the question I really want to get to, though. This is from John Reed, who I'm a big fan of. He's with 𝗔𝗯nci𝘂𝘁𝘁. If you don't know him, he's joining on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining, John. John says modern ERP isn't dead. What is dead is over-customized legacy ERP, which is very difficult to embed with AI and analytics. The future is industry-based platforms on which to perform innovations. Modern SaaS software plays a big role here because AI requires this type of data and is pretty dumb without that data. It's well said and a good kind of a clarification of this whole thing we're talking about. Because I think, we're saying, is ERP software dead? Yes or no? The real answer is maybe somewhere in between. And I think he does a great job of explaining what that in between is. If it's over customized, bloated, inflexible, yeah, that part's dead. But ERP as a category probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon, especially if they can get their stuff together and
No, you
provide.
think about the business functions that are controlled by enterprise resource planning, right? Those core functions still need to go on. The interoperability platforms that we're talking about, mission control over the whole thing, has to have a living host. It has to have that data and information brought up so that it can be normalized in a data lake environment and then mined through business intelligence tools. That's the way the whole thing comes together and works. So no, ERP is not going to go away. Those core critical functions are not going to go away. But can they be integrated in that entire digital enterprise operations picture? And importantly, can you deploy this over a period of time? So can you get to some quick wins with the bridge to this interoperability layer or foundation that you put in place, the mission control, and then build out the rest of the systems over time in the proper sequence? So moving from ECC to something else in 5 years rather than that immediately. That's the picture for the next 5 to 10 years that we're trying to draw here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. Just a couple of comments here, and then I'm going to get to a sort of a capstone wrap-up question here. But
probably need to.
Yeah, at some point we have to. I mean, we could go for hours here with all the great questions here. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, here's just a comment I think is interesting. That this is from 𝗏𝗃𝘁 on YouTube. 𝗏𝗃𝘁 says AI is learning supersonic fast, especially from large vendors, and soon will provide new ERP solutions with open source and very cheap. That is something. This is a good point, actually. This is something you do have to look at. Is one of the advantages that the big vendors have, these incumbent vendors like SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, is that when, like, for example, SAP and John, actually, if John's still on, John Reed, he can probably check me on this because he follows the SAP space so closely. But last I heard, I think it was like 30,000 SAP customers had opted in to train the SAP AI models, or to use their data to train the models. So on one hand, that's a lot of power. I mean, that's a smart AI. That's a potentially really smart AI solution, because you think of the world's largest companies using SAP and using their data, their mass amounts of transactional data to train an AI model. I mean, that's pretty powerful. Now the question becomes, is that power worth the trade-off of the fact that now you're sort of maybe leveling the playing field too much? All your competitors now are using the same AI model that you helped train. And I mean, that becomes a whole nother conversation. And then of course you've got the data privacy and intellectual property issues, which that's going to take decades to sort that out in courts and whatnot. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think the big vendors have an advantage over the smaller ones when it comes to AI models? And what are your thoughts?
I think they do, because you just think about literally billions of dollars being invested in upgrading systems, and now the continuous upgrading that's available through multi-tenant environments, where the one-to-many model, everyone gets the same upgrades, everyone gets the same changes. And they've also been paying a lot of attention, and this is to the a nod to the ERP major vendors. They've really been asking their customers, their constituents, what do you need to see from us? And a lot of the answers have been coming back as AI flexibility tools that I can configure my systems on top of core ERP and so forth going forward. And they've listened, and they've created the ability and the tools to make that entirely possible. So when you look at spending billions of dollars, I mean, look what Oracle has done in the last couple of months in terms of their stock price. A lot of that is based upon their database sales, but it's also their enterprise sales just gone through the roof, making Larry Ellison the second richest man in the world. So the big ERPs do have an advantage in this, and there is going to be a lot of consolidation.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about vendor lock and also the fact that switching costs are so high. Moving off your old ERP system just gets more and more difficult over time. So the big vendors do have that advantage too, which is,
Mhm.
for example, you look at PepsiCo. I was just reading about Pepsi and how they're doing all this AI stuff. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple weeks ago about this. They're doing all this AI stuff with Salesforce, but they use SAP as well. And you think about these big, massive Fortune 500 companies that are using SAP. I mean, you're not just gonna think about the ripping out SAP to put in Oracle or ripping out Oracle to put in SAP at a big Fortune 500 company. It's super hard to do, which is why, you build this knowledge base around a certain vendor and then you end up upgrading and staying with that vendor for a long time. And the big vendors know it. So to be fair, there's not a whole lot of options for these or historically, there haven't been a lot of options for these really big companies, but Palantir is an example, and Snowflake too. They're getting some really big clients. I mean, there's some big companies that are using Palantir. I mean, big, not just private sector, but public sector too. In the case of Palantir, big government organizations, huge government entities, federal governments are using Palantir along with all their legacy systems that they don't want to replace or they can't replace.
Not to promote Accenture, but Accenture and Palantir just announced a partnership like yesterday to develop enterprise operations for government agencies.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And Palantir also has a partnership with SAP. SAP just announced that at Sapphire as well.
Yes.
So we could talk for hours, and I wish we could, but we can't. But just to sort of wrap it up or bring this all full circle, if you were advising a board of directors and a management team, which you do this every day, so this isn't just hypothetical, but if you were today advising a board of directors or a leadership team that's trying to future-proof their digital strategy, what would your closing remarks be in terms of the pros and cons or the considerations when you're looking at ERP versus alternative options as it stands right now?
Well, pick partners that will persist. So understand exactly what your ERP vendor roadmaps entail, and also take those alternatives with a little bit of a grain of salt, understanding that you're going to have to do a lot of development work kind of internally with your teams, getting everyone on board with making the changes. So it really requires that upfront phase 0 that prepares the organization to move forward in a single direction. Everyone behind the same banner, everyone behind the same flag. Without that, you just can't get to an end state that is going to give a return on investment and a return on the work that needs to go into this and then be fully adopted by your entire organization. So that would be my advice in closing statement, and it often has been the closing statement. You got to start with the end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great advice. And as I'm giving some closing comments here too, I'm going to put up one more QR code right here, top left corner of your screen. It's for, we have a series of assessments we'll do for project teams, leadership teams that are going through digital transformations or thinking about going through them. We're happy to do a free assessment for you. We'll come in and talk to you and look at what you're doing, what your plans are, what questions you have. It will provide you some guidance and recommendations based on where you are in your journey. So if you're interested in that, just scan the QR code. It'll take you to the page where you can register to schedule that with our team and ourselves. But I would say just in closing too, just to build on what you just said, Greg, and I'll flash up some comments that we didn't have time to get to here while I'm closing out here. We won't have time to discuss, but I'll at least pop them up here. But I think the key is to get tech agnostic feedback. We're happy to help. Companies like Third Stage can come in and give you an agnostic view of the world. We're not affiliated with any of the vendors we're talking about here today, or any other vendors that we didn't talk about here today. We're not affiliated with. So we have no skin in the game. We don't receive any sort of compensation from anyone but the clients that pay us to give them unbiased, unfiltered advice. So if you're looking for that realistic, no BS view of the world and how you can navigate that, we're happy to help. You can reach out to us and be sure to scan the QR code to register or to sign up for one of our assessments. So this podcast will become part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast, which will get released next week. So by being here today, you were part of the live production of that podcast. Thank you for doing that. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes that we've done. It's been 220 20 or 30 episodes we've done so far. And you'll see this one pop up on that website next week. But go to transformationgroundcontrol.com if you want to view past episodes and learn more like this. We've got Greg's been on this podcast several times. We have had hundreds, literally over 200 guests on the show over the years. So be sure to check that out at transformationgroundcontrol.com. We do these live discussions every Tuesday, same time, same place. We usually don't go this long. We usually try to keep it to an hour, but Greg was gracious enough at this time that we went a little longer. So thank you everyone for joining here today. Thank you for the great questions. If you have any questions, reach out. I'll include my contact information below. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you all soon. So thanks again, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Thanks all. Join us at Stratosphere.
Yes. Join us at Stratosphere. Go to stratosphere2025.com. And also register for one of our free assessments. We're giving you lots of calls to action, lots of options that you can choose from here, depending on where you are in your journey. So hope to see you all soon. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.